Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the session on sustainable nitrogen management for healthy oceans, environment and economy. It's hosted by the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. So I'm the moderator today. My name is Bill Bealey. I'm from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. We've got 4 great presentations to share with you in this session, which will help you understand a bit more about the nitrogen problem, particular reference to the marine environment and our oceans. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Suzanne Robertson from the Asian Development Bank, who will just say a few words at the start. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I'm happy to be opening this session here on sustainable nitrogen management for healthy oceans, environment, and economy. I would like to start off by thanking our co-organizers and contributors today. We're looking forward to your presentations. But let me start off by exploring a little bit more about why we're discussing nitrogen today, why it's an important topic for our healthy oceans, and what it is that ADB can do to contribute to the global solution for sustainable nitrogen management. Nitrogen is an important element. It's in the air we breathe. It has contributed to increased food production and meeting our food security needs. It is also an important part of industry. Yet as vital as these services are, the growing demand on livestock, agriculture, transport, industry, and energy sectors has led to a sharp increase in the presence of reactive nitrogen in our ecosystems. Nitrogen pollution is now a major threat to our water quality, our air quality, greenhouse gas balance, ecosystems, biodiversity, and our health and well-being. Marine nitrogen pollution is becoming extremely widespread, contributing to harmful algal blooms, eutrophication, ocean dead zones, and degradation of ocean systems. As examples, agriculture is an important sector. It's the basis of our food security, it provides jobs, but it's also a sector heavily dependent on natural resources, as well as a high demand on nitrogen fertilizer. It's also a major source of non-point source pollution, with runoff entering waterways adversely affecting terrestrial freshwater, as well as the marine environment. Similarly, wastewater, like septic and sewage, are also significant contributors of nitrogen pollution to our waterways. And while it may seem that sectors like agriculture, being predominantly rural, are far removed from our oceans, it's through the flow of water that these far removed pollution sources can negatively affect our oceans. Addressing nitrogen management is important. We need to be able to reduce pollution and find efficiencies to reduce overuse as well as wastage. But to do that, we will need to understand the use, sources of pollution, and how those contributes to the benefits and threats of nitrogen use and the alteration of the nitrogen cycle as the basis to identify where we can find opportunities to make improvements in the system. So at ADB, what are we doing with this? Well, ADB has a nature-positive approach to our investments. We have a goal to enrich biodiversity, store carbon, have clean air and water, halt pollution, as well as reduce pandemic risks. But nature-positive needs to find the new normal between sustainable economic growth with nature. And we need to be able to enhance the resilience of our planet and societies by finding that balance better. To do this, ADB adopts a source to sea as well as landscape approaches. This enables us to address the environmental issues within the correct scale. It allows us to call attention to the drivers of pollution and nature loss, which can be addressed with distinct action within a watershed, starting from the headwaters and following the flow of the water through the river to the adjacent coastal waters. This approach directly addresses the linkages between land, water, delta, estuary, the coast, and our ocean systems. Taking this approach forward, it is important that we hold events like this Ocean Forum, as it's here that we have the opportunity to discuss and present the solutions to address nitrogen pollution issues, which in turn can contribute to healthy oceans, as well as a more productive agriculture sector. Having access to innovative solutions and being able to identify the necessary elements we need to create that right enabling institutional governance and policy conditions, as well as supporting the generation and transfer of knowledge, are all important first steps. So coming back to this session today, we will introduce you to the vision for global action on nitrogen, its development and how it can mobilize future investments to meet the goals of the UN resolution on sustainable nitrogen management and the subsequent Colombo Declaration. Presentations will cover technical solutions for closing the loop and reducing subsequent losses of nitrogen. Examples of progress in action will illustrate how sustainable nitrogen management is emerging as a key opportunity for technology and finance innovation, improving the health and sustainability of our oceans and building a circular economy. So I hope that the session today will help elevate our discussions on sustainable nitrogen management to the next level so we can scale up our actions to address drivers and halt these sources of pollution, as well as contribute to that nature positive future. I hope that you will all enjoy the discussions and find the information useful for your future work. Thank you all, and back to you, Bill.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's excellent. Thank you. Okay, so our first speaker is Professor Mark Sutton. He's from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and he's going to talk about sustainable nitrogen management for oceans and multiple co-benefits. And I can remind you that we have a question and answer session at the end of our talk, so please put your questions into the Q&A tool as the talks are going on. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, thanks very much, Bill, and that's great to be with everybody today. Just to say, I'd like to also acknowledge some inputs from my colleague Pravaja Ramachandran into this presentation. So let's just look at nitrogen in the environment. The point is that there are different kinds of nitrogen we need to recognize. Number one form of nitrogen is the nitrogen in the air we breathe, dinitrogen, super triple bond in the middle, really stable, does nothing but make the sky blue. It's the kind of thing we need for a stable atmosphere. But once humans and nature start converting it into different forms like ammonia, nitric oxide, that's air pollution, both air pollution forms, and nitrogen dioxide, and nitrates in water, nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas, and of course, a whole plethora of organic nitrogen forms from all enzymes, proteins, DNA. These are all reactive nitrogen compounds and leaking into the environment, having huge benefits for food production, but also adverse effects. So let's look at some of those adverse effects, and we frame it sometimes as a cascade, like a waterfall, because when you convert atmospheric pure dinitrogen, you put energy in, and it's now a high energy form, and it starts cascading away. And the first way we do that is by fertilizer manufacture, crop biological nitrogen fixation to make food for crop. And then we start getting the leakages of these different nitrogen forms that I've just mentioned. And then you put it into livestock, and that multiplies the amount of nitrogen lost to the environment. Not forgetting the combustion sources, industry, transport, are leading to extra of these gases. And this is where we start seeing the cascade operating as those different forms start reacting and forming new products in the atmosphere, into waters, both on that pathway from source to sea in the rivers, but also the pathway in the atmosphere, which will ultimately end up in the sea often as well. And as we saturate ecosystems, those ecosystems start themselves emitting more reactive nitrogen back to the atmosphere until right at the end of it, it's called denitrified, means it's converted back at the end of the waterfall to that dinitrogen. Now, on the way, we've got a whole plethora of different environmental effects from greenhouse balance, stratospheric ozone loss, particulate matter in air pollution, the coastal zone, the water pollution. And my message is all of those issues are interacting. That's why we need a more circular, more efficient nitrogen cycle. And at present, something like 80% of the nitrogen compounds we put in are wasted, not going to useful forms. So why nitrogen? Let's distill it out into 5 big issues: air quality, soil quality, the water quality issues, biodiversity, these climate, all fitting together. And in addition, a huge waste of resources. On the planet, that amounts to something like $200 billion worth of cash equivalent as fertilizer equivalent has become pollution, has been wasted to the environment. Of course, that means it's part of livelihoods. Here's a a farmer in India. He's showing me very proudly his azolla fern. He's using that to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. He doesn't want to use fertilizer, and this is his solution, but it means his livelihood is at stake if he doesn't provide enough nitrogen for the crops. That which is wasted is a challenge to him, as well as pollution. So let's just take a few examples of how nitrogen is really dynamic and everywhere and invisible, we're saying. The example I give here is the Express Pearl ship, which sunk off the coast of Sri Lanka last year. And firstly, the ship was carrying nitric acid. It looks like the nitric acid was possibly the cause of the fire as it leaked. Secondly, there were high nitrogen oxides emissions to the atmosphere. It's air pollution, but of course that will land back on the oceans as well as being a human health impact. In addition, the ship was carrying over 1,000 tons of urea, which ultimately will have gone into the ocean, leading to massive coastal impacts. So in just that one story, there's a microcosm of these many different ways in which nitrogen is threatening our oceans, threatening our wider environment. Now let's just come on to the ocean specifically. And of course, nitrogen is threatening changing many ecosystems. And I just pick up on the coral story to show how nitrogen is often forgotten. Because of course, we're aware of the coral bleaching challenge from climate. But our message is that this is not the only challenge out there. These issues are interacting, and that nitrogen pollution into the waters is an additional threat. Just to show these couple of extra slides, around the coast of South Asia here, the dark areas of very high nitrate levels linked to pollution coming into the sea. You can see there are major gradients high at the top of the coast, but also deep outwelling with reducing environments in deep environments, which are actually natural. But there's also a scale issue here. You can't see the Maldives, but around every individual island, there may be potential really localized threats. So that's the challenge we face with nitrogen, is localized, regional, and global. When you come to nitrous oxide, of course, that's a global threat. And just to look at some of the challenges of, in addition to the coral bleaching, as you've got extra nitrogen and indeed phosphorus, you can destabilize reefs, slow their recovery after bleaching, changing different dominance, competition with erosion and proliferation of boring organisms, for example. So this means that reefs in a nitrogen polluted environment may not recover so quickly after coral bleaching, adding this extra challenge. Now, coming swiftly to solutions, and our colleagues will talk more about solutions, but I'm going to introduce that. We're working with the International Nitrogen Management System for UNEP, and we're also working with the UNECE. In fact, we're working with multiple UN processes. And here is a book recently produced. See the key number at the bottom of the screen there if you want to get access to this. But it essentially is summarizing 24 principles, 76 measures, from dietary measures in livestock to housing measures of how you manage your manure, to covering your manure storage, nutrient recovery messages. We'll hear more about that. Nitrification inhibitors with your fertilizers to make them more efficient, landscape measures. So, you can go on, but the message here is this is not just about protecting the oceans. If we manage these nitrogen compounds better, we'll get win-wins for the ocean, air quality, climate, biodiversity, all at the same time. Now, how do we move forward in policy? And again, we'll hear more about that. But what we're looking at present is moving towards cooperation between different intergovernmental conventions. The diagram here shows a vision of something that does not yet exist. We're calling it the Interconvention Nitrogen Coordination Mechanism, where you've got the different conventions starting to learn from each other, the member states, the technical scientific support from the International Nitrogen Management System, within which our South Asian Nitrogen Hub contributes. That's under development at the moment. And of course, it's up to the member states to say, how do they want it to work in detail? So let's just change you as we move towards the finish here about different evolving narratives on nitrogen. And this is quite important because a few years ago, we were all talking about just reduce one pollutant. The different scientific communities were not well connected. A different set of people on nitrous oxide, on ammonia, for example. It meant we were missing critical synergies which can motivate action and, of course, lead to barriers and trade-offs. I think the next stage was then to talk about increasing nitrogen use efficiency. That's a really positive approach. It means improve your efficiency, you improve your production. but it's actually quite hard to share goals. If everybody should improve by 20%, those on the highest efficiency have to do more than those on the lowest. And finally, we're now in this third stage about reducing wasted nitrogen resources. All of those nitrogen polluting resources are waste. Denitrification to N2 is a waste. That means we're summing all those nitrogen forms. And it also allows more equitable goals, because we look now at a goal to halve nitrogen waste. If we halve it, if you have no waste, you've got nothing to halve. It's fostering a circular economy, and it's looking towards saving of that $200 billion. If we halve it, we're saving $100 billion per year of resources. Now, this is a view of the total nitrogen waste in the world, valued in millions of dollars at present prices, going back to 1960. And here we are, the 50th anniversary of UNEP this year, and it's basically been increasing. And it's projected to increase with population growth. It will go up even more with the red line if we eat more meat and dairy products. And that's the challenge ahead, to really reduce those pollution. Our idea is that by working together for multiple win-wins for ocean, coastal zones, air pollution, biodiversity, etc., that will place a stronger case for action, particularly in the world where we're looking to save money and be more efficient post-COVID recovery. And we're going to see this, this is the point about investing to recover. So here's the last slide. Thinking about nitrogen in the circular economy. The diagram on my right, if I try to distill my science into the simplest possible, we're fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere, turning it into a resource. We would like to recycle, recycle, recycle. And of course, the more we recycle, the less pollution and less waste back to the atmosphere. With action across all of these sectors, it's not the role of one sector, it's the role of everybody. Opportunity for farmers to be more profitable, industry to waste less resources. Of course, we're going to hear more about wastewater, landscape design being more effective and resilient, and of course, about the food we eat on more sustainable diets, more healthy, better for the oceans and the wider environment. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. That's excellent. Okay, at this point, we'd like to share with you a short video about nitrogen, and you'll recognize some of the impacts Mark was describing there. We made this for COP, the COP26 forum in Glasgow last year. Give you a nice visual into the nitrogen sources and impacts and the challenges for improving sustainable nitrogen management. So that should be coming now. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We're back now. So our message is very much nitrogen for net zero. So our next speaker is Professor Tapan Adya. He's from the Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology, University in India. Professor Tapan will talk about reducing nitrogen pollution from agriculture and combustion sources in South Asia. So over to you, Tapan. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for this introduction. I will be speaking on reducing nitrogen pollution from agriculture and combustion sources in South Asia. And the this South Asian, just a minute. Next slide. It doesn't move. Yep. Sorry. Yeah. In the South Asia, it consists of 8 countries, of which these 5 countries like Pakistan, India, then Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. These are the 5 countries which share a maritime boundary and covers around 4% of the global coastline. Now, this region is broadly known as the South Asian Seas, which has got 2 extensions. One is the Bay of Bengal, and another is the Arabian Sea, which is an extension for the Gulf. Both these two actually down it matches the Indian Ocean, and actually we can call it as a insertion of this Indian Ocean into the into these 2 regions. Now, this region, this South Asian Seas, is expected to be highly polluted because of the huge background activity as well as large scale of, and these seas also support the large scale migration or transport of the things through marine route, and around 25% of the global oil traffic passes through this marine route. So this also raises the problem of pollution. Next slide. I don't know why it's not. Yeah. The coastal habitats of South Asia are at a high risk of eutrophication due to the accumulation of reactive nitrogen, and the measurement of using the net anthropogenic nitrogen input model, it has been found that the values in Indian riverine watersheds is around 4616 kilogram nitrogen per kilometer square, which is higher than US, than the Baltic drainage basin, and even slightly higher than China. So there are policies of coastal pockets of coastal eutrophication around the Indian peninsula, and end-loading has been observed also in several lakes and other inland water bodies. Fertilizer use dominate the anthropogenic N input in South Asian seas region because the South Asian hinterland mostly is agriculturally active area, and the nitrate concentration in the coastal water of India, which actually majority of it leads to the sea. The offshore has been measured to be varying from 50.3 millimolar to 0.39 millimolar of the nitrate concentration. Yep. Next. The major greenhouse gases, like polluting ones, not exactly greenhouse gases, major polluting gaseous nitrogen forms like N2O, ammonia, and NOx. This has been emission trends have been plotted, and this has been put here on the basis of the standardized by the gross domestic product, and then also the per capita as well as the total emission. You can see the total emission is increasing, all the 3 gaseous pollutants, and the major contribution is from the agriculture, while subsequent other contributions are from the road transport and combustion, etc., etc. In the South Asian region, the main factors influencing the nitrogen flows are strong N exchange over the thickly vegetated regions, massive agricultural activities, then the huge amount of animal excreta generated by the enormous cattle population, high amount of municipal solid waste produced at the densely populated regions, increased fossil fuel use to support growing economic and industrial activities. So these gives us cue where we have to take action for reducing the gaseous nitrogen or the reactive nitrogen emission into the environment. The following key areas are needed to be considered for reducing leakage of reactive N wastes, improving the performance of N fertilizers, improved management of biological nitrogen fixation, improving performance of livestock production, improved use and proper cycling of organic N resources like the manures, etc., reduce food wastage and balanced meat and dairy consumption, measures to improve landscape resilience to N pollution, and above all, the reduce fossil fuel use and shift to renewable energy. South Asia accounts for the around 11% of the global nitrogen production and 19% of the global N consumption. If we see the different regions of the world, South Asia has got the highest amount of growth rate for nitrogen fertilizer application, which is around 50% and much higher than almost all regions, including that of the total world value. Yeah, next. Yeah, now feasibility of reducing this N waste in South Asia. As I have mentioned, the major emission is reactive N input is from the use of fertilizer. Now reducing this N waste, this is an ambitious target, and they can be achieved in both ways, either this drastic reduction in N use, which is probably difficult because we have to depend on the use of fertilizer to feed the growing population, and increased nitrogen use efficiency. This is one very interesting sector concentrated by the scientists, agricultural scientists, and the farmers as well as the industry, and includes probably possible with new technologies and innovations, including new molecules, nanofertilizers, urease inhibitors, etc. Some of the success stories of the increased N-use efficiency have already been recorded in South Asia, like neem-coated urea in India. Now, the entire Indian use of urea fertilizer is neem-coated, and that resulted into the reduction of the urea use to certain extent. Leaf color chart in India and as well as in Bangladesh. This is actually measures the chlorophyll content of the leaves and thereby indirect measurement of the nitrogen content in the soil and the plant. And depending upon the color, we can manipulate the application of fertilizers, nitrogen, and thereby control the use of unnecessary use of fertilizer nitrogen. Urea displacement in Bangladesh, this has been piloted by IFDC as well as the state country government of Bangladesh, where the displacement of urea reduces the urea loss. Then also some other adjunct methods like soil health card in India, as well as nano nitrogen. This has been a tremendous development. And during the recent difficulty of Sri Lanka for the fertilizer, we have helped them with around 1 lakh liters of this nano nitrogen, which is required in much less amount as compared to the conventional nitrogen. I would like to mention about the combustion sources, especially fuel consumption and mitigation scenario in South Asia. You can see we have taken the 2017 as the base year and taking 2030. These are the two groups. One is the business as usual and another is the mitigation scenario. You can see by 2030, we can reduce it but to a great extent, and probably by 2040, this could be further reduced if we introduce the mitigation measures. Some of the mitigation measures I have listed here, like road transport, which depends mostly on diesel. Growth rate is around 5.3%, and by switching 51% diesel consumption to CNG, we can reduce to a great extent the emission of the greenhouse gas, nitrogen gaseous thing. Industry, coal, which is mostly dependent on coal, and the current growth rate is 14.5%. By displacing the 22% coal with renewables, we can control this one. Then the power, it is also again dependent on coal, and 5.2% is the current growth rate, which probably we can, by displacing 22% of coal with renewables, we can manage that. Residential, which is fuel load, it's already growth rate, it has been controlled by the countries, different countries, because the growth rate is minus, and displacing further with the 20% LPG, this can be controlled to a great extent. So there are possibilities, there are options, and the country governments are trying to use them. Next one. Yeah. This is an example of one of the greenhouse gases, N2O, how we can, by having the N-waste, we can reduce the N2O emission in South Asia. We have got two lines here, business as usual, that is blue line, and having the N-waste, that is the red line. By taking 2010 as the base year, when we had a gaseous emission of around 0.58 million tons of N2O, then by 2030, by introducing having the nitrogen waste, some of this intervention, we can bring it down to 47 MT, and by 2050 it can go down further by 0.41. That means it is even less than the base year of 20. So having N-waste may reduce the emission by 19% by 2030 and 30% by 2050. Now, this is an interesting observation that it is possible. With proper innovative techniques and proper management of the nitrogen, we can reduce to a great extent. It is not very difficult. And as has been pointed out, that around $200 billion economy on nitrogen, at least by reduction, we can make it. Many of the South Asian countries, the country government, they subsidize the fertilizer. And this type of reducing the nitrogen waste, it will be a win-win scenario, resulting protection of the environment as well as savings from the country government. Thank you.
Thank you, Tapan. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Anna Lundbom. She's from Sweden. She's working for a company called Easy Mining, who are looking into nitrogen removal and recovery from wastewater. And her talk is titled From Wastewater to Nitrogen Fertilizer, Profiting from the Circular Economy. And I'll remind the audience that you can post questions in the tool. Over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this important subject. As you said, my name is Anna Lundbom, and I'm working at a company where we're focusing on creating circular material flows, especially for nutrients. What we want to do for nitrogen is to change the line of flow that we have today, where we first extract the nitrogen from the atmosphere, creating massive CO2 emissions. And then after using it in the society, when a lot of it ends up in the wastewater systems, we remove it to prevent eutrophication, which is really important, but we just release it back to the atmosphere. What we want to do is to create a circular material flow here by after removing the nitrogen from the wastewater, keeping it in a form that is usable in society, for example, in agriculture. And in that way, replacing nitrogen products that otherwise would have been extracted from the atmosphere. We also want to do this in a climate-friendly way, without releasing any laughing gases that we've heard about earlier today from Mark, for example, and also do it in a resource-efficient and energy-efficient way. Easy Mining has developed a technology suitable for waste streams containing a high concentration of ammonium nitrogen, such as reject water from dewatering of sludge in wastewater treatment plants. We're also trying this process on leakage water, and we see a potential for biogas and manure, for example. We remove more than 98% of the ammonium nitrogen, and after catching the nitrogen, we convert it to a nitrogen product usable in the society. I'm very proud to say that we in December last year inaugurated our demonstration plant for this process. The demonstration plant is built in an EU Life co-financed project, Refertilize. And our project partners are, for example, Biofoss, Denmark's largest wastewater treatment company, and Lantmännen, a Swedish large agriculture cooperation that will evaluate the nitrogen product from the process. In this demonstration plant, we produce ammonium sulfate. It's possible to do other nitrogen products as well, depending on which acid we use in the process, I can say. The demonstration plant that you see in the picture have a capacity of 4 cubic meters per hour. So it's, even if it's a demonstration plant, it's actually a size suitable for wastewater treatment plants with about 70,000 people connected. So it's quite a good size. Finally, our wastewaters contain a lot of important resources from the society. But we've heard today that these resources in the wrong place are creating massive problems for the nature and for us. And today, most of these resources in the water, we actually waste it. This technology is one technology enabling the society to start seeing and using the wastewater treatment plants and other wastewaters for what they really are, resource plants. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That's quite mind-blowing at what you've got going there. It's excellent. So thank you for that. So our next speaker is Janaki Amaratunge, who is the Director of International Relations at the Ministry of Environment in Sri Lanka. Janaki is going to talk to us about her experiences of mobilizing international action on sustainable nitrogen management. So thank you, Janaki, over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to reflect some of the actions Sri Lanka has taken so far in mobilizing international action on sustainable nitrogen management. So I'll briefly reflect what we have done so far and the way forward on sustainable nitrogen management in the international arena. As you all know, humanity's very existence depends on nitrogen. Over time, we have learned how to harness its power. Pulling nitrogen from the air and fixing it in soil is one reason why the human population has expanded so rapidly. Yet, as the previous presenters has very well explained, its usefulness has come at a terrible cost. Our failure to use nitrogen efficiently is polluting the land, air, and water. So in 2019, United Nations Environment Assembly Resolution 4/14, sponsored by India and Bangladesh, recognized the multiple pollution threats resulting from anthropogenic reactive nitrogen with adverse effects on the freshwater, terrestrial, and marine environments. Following this UNIA Resolution 4/14, Sri Lanka has taken the leadership to launch of the UN Global Campaign on Sustainable Nitrogen Management in Colombo from 23rd to 24th October 2019 with the guidance of International Nitrogen Management System and the South Asia Nitrogen Hub. A high-level segment and science policy dialogue was held under the joint leadership of His Excellency Maithripala Sirisena, President and Minister of Mahaweli Development and Environment of Sri Lanka, and Ms. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of United Nations Environment Programme, in order to support the implementation of the UNIA Resolution 4/14 on sustainable nitrogen management. As we all know, in 2019, this UNIA Resolution 4/14 recognize multiple pollution threats of anthropogenic reactive nitrogen, and it introduced a general framework of actions to address global nitrogen pollution. So, recognizing the importance of global sustainable nitrogen management, Sri Lanka marked her leadership for Colombo Declaration on Sustainable Nitrogen Management, which has been developed with the technical support of the International Nitrogen Management System, a joint activity of the UNEP and the International Nitrogen Initiative, supported by the Global Environment Facility. As part of the declaration, environment ministers and officials representing the governments of more than 30 member states came together to endorse United Nations plan for a campaign on sustainable nitrogen management, the event called Nitrogen for Life, and it was held in Sri Lanka in 2019. The 24th October 2019 event was an especially historic moment for planet Earth. With the signing of the Colombo Declaration by countries, for the first time, governments have agreed to work together on a major quantitative global goal for improved nitrogen management. At a time when the world grapples with the menace of air pollution, killing 7 million people prematurely every year, spearheaded by Sri Lanka, United Nations member states then endorsed a proposed roadmap for action on nitrogen challenge, introduced by the United Nations Environment Programme, which was also endorsed by the Colombo Declaration on Sustainable Nitrogen Management. Colombo Declaration on Sustainable Nitrogen Management provided more clarity on how the actions and the process of sustainable nitrogen management to be moved forwarded. These actions include a process of establishing an interconvention nitrogen coordination mechanism, which Professor Mark has already explained, and to coordinate all the relevant multilateral environment agreements and the relevant processes at the international level. Built on these commitments, goals, and ambition to have nitrogen waste by 2030, Sri Lanka submitted a draft resolution on sustainable nitrogen management to upcoming UNEA 5.2, which is the resumed fifth session of United Nations Environment Assembly in last October, and now it is currently under negotiating with member states. This draft resolution aims to mobilize the member states to act on a nationally driven plans to achieve the goals of United Nations Environment Assembly Resolution 4/14 of 2019 and the SDGs, and also subsequent decisions taken on sustainable nitrogen management. So we have set an ambition to have nitrogen waste based on nationally driven action plans. So we will be able to achieve sustainable development goals as far as we can according to that roadmap and national action plans. So in mobilizing the member states for sustainable nitrogen management, Sri Lanka organized a pre-COP26 event called Nitrogen for Net Zero as a virtual event. A draft outcome document was prepared for COP26. It was published already in our government website, and you can refer it. Also, Sri Lanka organized a special event called Rediscovering Nitrogen in collaboration with the UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology and the other partner organizations, with the leadership of His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa in Glasgow, to aware policymakers, international community, and other relevant stakeholders. Further, Sri Lanka organized a Blue Zone side event to update progress of the South Asian sustainable nitrogen management practices, experience in the Glasgow COP26 conference to share our best practices and lessons learned with the participants. In conclusion, Sri Lanka has been a champion on global sustainable nitrogen management campaign since 2019, and we are working to achieve the global goals of Sustainable Development Goals in this journey, in partnering with South Asia Nitrogen Hub, International Nitrogen Management System, International Nitrogen Initiative, UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology, and other expert organizations and professionals in the regions and at the international level. So finally, I request all of the participants who joined in this event to join with us further in achieving our global goal of sustainable nitrogen management in the coming decades. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janaki. Thank you so much. Okay, so we now have around 10 minutes, I think, for questions to the panel. A few questions have come in. So if the panel could come together, you're there on screen. So the first question that's come in, I think, is possibly for Mark, but the question is, what do you mean about halving nitrogen waste, and how achievable is this goal? Mark.
Yes, I think the first thing to say is that there's different ways people have defined waste. Some people will say waste is only waste if you deliberately wasted it. And we would take a different view and say that all of the emission to air and to water and that reconversion of nitrogen back to dinitrogen is a waste of resources. It's something we could have used, and hence that 100 billion. So we've got a different view to waste to many, and maybe Anna wants to comment on that as well from that perspective they're coming up, where they convert it to resource. In terms of achievability, what we see is that many measures will get there, almost half, and many technical measures, but we've got to combine that, I think, as well with the societal choice measures. The graph I showed you, if we were to carry on increasing the amount of meat and dairy eaten in the world, it's going to make it much harder. I'm not saying everybody needs to be vegan, but the amount of meat and dairy we eat matters, and that has to be part of the discussion in the future.
Thank you. Anna, any other comments from the panel? Or I can move on.
No, I can just agree with Mark there that the waste is, we have to reconsider what waste really are, and both, as you highlighted, Mark, that think that we don't see it waste today is wasting resources, like the releasing back the nitrogen that we once extracted. That's a waste. And then the things that we see as waste today, the contaminants. Yes, they are contaminants in the wrong place, but they are really resources. Many of it, anyway, are resources if they're in the right place. And that we have. So we really have to, as you say, Mark, reconsider our way of seeing what is waste.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to another question. What role could marine algae play in reducing nitrogen loss from wastewater treatment plants or aquaculture farms? Anyone take that one on?
I'd like to have a shot at it. And I see the parallel there with the work we've done on land, where about planting trees around farms to recapture. So you've got a source, the emission is in the environment, can surrounding activities help? And I think our answer is yes, they can help, but there's an efficiency challenge, because how much can you really recover? So for example, and how well can you control it? So on the land, we plant a load of trees, hectares and hectares around a farm, that will reabsorb some of the nitrogen as ammonia lost in the environment. But how well can one control the marine algae around nitrogen losses in wastewater plants? My guess is that yes, you can achieve something, but reducing emissions at source is always the most effective measure. So I think there can be a role, but let's not forget to reduce emissions at source.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in there? No. Okay. Here's quite a nice one. Is it possible to completely avoid fertilizer in agriculture? I guess they mean fertilizer, mineral fertilizer. I don't know, Tapan, is that something you could cover?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think the nitrogen is very important for the plants to grow, and fertilizer nitrogen provides a quick fix solution for immediate availability of nitrogen to the crop plant. Now, as has been pointed out in the earlier discussions, a good amount of it is not taken up by the plant and contaminates the environment. So the idea comes that how we can manage this chemical nitrogen. It is not possible to grow, it is possible to grow crop without chemical fertilizer, but we have to provide alternate sources like organic manures and other things so that the plants continue to get nitrogen, which is very essential for its growth. So probably fertilizer nitrogen completely may not be possible, but proper suitable management and integration with the organic residues, animal manures, and thereby recycling the nitrogen can help.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to just add in on this because Suzanne, you mentioned right at the beginning about, I think, effectively biological nitrogen fixation, and it's often said that we've avoided polluting fertilizers. We have a natural source of biological nitrogen fixation, therefore that's definitely good. I think it's important to analyze that scientifically and also get further evidence to show that for every kilogram of biological nitrogen fixation, there would be less pollution in the environment. The first reason that might be true is because it's effectively a slow release source. The nitrogen is produced biologically as the crops need it. So in principle, we would expect it to be more efficient. However, there are caveats, and I think a great one is where one plants a legume crop to improve soil condition and then plows it in for a subsequent crop. And at that point, there's a big risk of a pulse of nitrogen pollution. And so we cannot always assume that biological nitrogen fixation will be perfectly happy and green. There can be effects as well that need to be recognized.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. What is important, stroke needed to create circular value chains? What a tricky one. I don't know.
I guess I can have a shot on that one first.
Okay.
Well, to create circular material flows, I mean, we first, of course, technology, but really this mind shift that we have been talking about earlier, what we highlighted before. So we start to see things, so we see the opportunities. And then we need legislation to really to make this possible, because that's what we are facing in many, not only in this process, but many of our other processes as well for circular material flows, that we have this legislation. Anyway, in Europe, there's a legislation focusing on origin, not on quality. And that prohibits us to use the circulated materials. So we really need, there's many parameters that we need, both technology, legislation, and also the willingness. So there's many things.
Okay.
But we're on a good way, I think. And there's a great interest at the moment. So I'm very hopeful for the future.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This is possibly about the express pearl. What could be done to recover from the nitric acid urea pollution spill from the shipping disaster? So how can that be cleaned up? Anyone like to try?
I'm going to give a short answer, and I invite disagreement with this answer, because there's a lot of stuff that's come out of the express pearl, from plastic pollution to nitrogen to other chemicals. When it comes to nitrogen pollution and other chemicals, I think my view is there is nothing that you can do to clean up. It's done, it's out there. It's dissolving in the environment, the ecosystem will be changing. Ultimately, the ecosystem with nitrogen will denitrify and recover if it's a one-off event, but the ecology will have been changed in the process. maybe you can do something with the plastic pollution about cleaning up. But again, it's a tough job cleaning plastic from the environment. So I think my answer is you've got to prevent those things happening at source. And with a big event like that, you're just going to have to live with the consequences.
Thank you. Just a couple more we can probably manage. So what's the best way to communicate this topic? You know, sustainable nitrogen is very important to bring up. How can we communicate this topic to different sectors like government, youth, NGOs? Who would like to try that?
Hi, Bill. I can start off on that one. It's actually an important question because while a lot of our work can often focus on the science of what we're doing and trying to understand the means and mechanisms, we need to find a way to communicate not only the results that we have, but also the importance of why this is an issue that we should be talking about and being able to address. So putting the science out there and explaining what it is that we're trying to do in an easily understandable format is an important first step. But it's also about engaging all the different stakeholders who are involved, especially if you take the example of agriculture as a sector. You know, you need to be able to convince farmers as well as ministries of agriculture and all of the support industry that tackling this issue is actually not only a challenge, but could bring benefit to them in the end, and kind of reduce the risk and the threat that discussing such a topic as this could bring. And one of the things that really makes it important in having these discussions is ensuring that the institutional arrangements are in place. How do we have this discussion cross-sectoral, bringing in multiple actors, governments, as well as the private sector? And how do we make sure that we know what it is in terms of that regulatory platform that we need in place to create the enabling conditions, such as Anna mentioned just previously? So it's not an easy thing to do, and there are many elements that we have to integrate, but it is something that we need to start raising and ensuring that we are having these discussions so that we can move forward with the agenda. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. We're coming close. So how to collect N2O emissions from biological wastewater treatment plants? So is there any scope for N2O emission capture?
Can I make a shot at this? I think that would be very difficult to capture nitrous oxide, and the reason is very unreactive. The other thing is that concentrations are very small. The interesting thing about N2O is it's a tiny fraction of the loss as a nitrogen resource, but it's important because it makes such a strong warming potential. The key thing is that nitrous oxide is in some way connected to denitrification, and so is dinitrogen emissions. So you get a big amount of dinitrogen loss, small amount of N2O. To me, again, I'm afraid for Tan Truong, I would say very difficult in my view, maybe Anna can disagree, to collect N2O, much easier to collect things like ammonia and get it recovered into useful products instead of going to N2O.
Thank you. I think we have room for one more, but only 1 minute. And I think this is for Suzanne. So what types of activities are the Asian Development Bank supporting that can contribute to sector development, rural jobs, and address environmental issues like nitrogen pollution? Maybe a minute max, Suzanne, if that.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, trying to make it very short. ADB has really two approaches that we can support our developing member countries with. One is through technical assistance, which allows us to do that policy advisory service, as well as research and development and capacity building. This allows us to put together all of the issues on the table, be able to discuss them, look at ways we can find solutions, and then put those forward. The other method that we often use in ADB is through our investment projects, where we're making loans to our developing member countries. And it's through these projects that we can do civil works and investments, but also these are projects where we can build in the institutional elements and also look at the necessary regulatory and policy frameworks that we need to be having in place so that we can enable some of the solutions and hopefully some of the solutions we've identified today. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we need to wrap up now. So I'd like to thank all the speakers today and Suzanne from the Asian Development Bank. I'd like to thank the Asian Development Bank for making this session possible. So thank you very much. And I will give final last words to Suzanne to send us on our way for the final few seconds.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Radio. Okay, so it is my pleasure to give the closing comments for today. It's been very interesting and informative. Thank you to Bill as our moderator guiding us through this session, as well as to all of our speakers. It's been really interesting to hear the different perspectives. I would also like to thank our behind the scenes team in terms of Deb and the Oceans team for all the work that you've done to put this forum together. It's been a huge task for you, I know, but it's very much appreciated. Thank you. As I think closing comment for the session today, it has been really interesting to hear that we can now rethink about the way that we're looking at the issue of nitrogen. Nitrogen is a resource, and even waste of nitrogen is a new resource for us to be considering how we can best capture and utilize that and rethink the way that we're working in our systems so that we can integrate this circular approach and find new efficiencies in what we're doing. But overall, thank you again for attending this spotlight session. I would just like to remind the audience that you can still go through the forum's event platform and explore the rich information available here. You can also visit the virtual expo and discover organizations' technical solutions on ocean health. And finally, we are excited to see you at the closing plenary session, which will be happening at 4:30 p.m. Manila time. So that is relatively soon, in 30 minutes or less. So it's going to be an exciting recap of all of the 3 days of the forum that we've had, and we'll get a chance to see the highlights from the entire program. It's been truly wonderful to have you all join us, and we will see you on the last time at the closing plenary. Thank you, and don't miss it. Back to you, Bill.
Thank you. That's it, I think. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for now.